Hello, it's the end of 2023. I'm sitting here and I'm preparing a lot of material for the next academic semester where I'm going to be teaching interaction design with virtual reality and all the human factors that goes along with it. So I thought this is a good opportunity to talk about how technology works, because a lot of the time in UX design, we hear about what something is. We might see nice visual examples, but we very rarely understand how technology works. So I'm going to spend the next few minutes, or more than a few minutes, going through what it is. So when we talk about virtual reality, what do we mean by that? So let's dive right in with virtual reality. So virtual reality is something which is really interesting in the design field. So XR, extended reality, you've got the entire field of everything. You've got augmented reality, which is about overlaying information on the world. You've got virtual reality, where you actually feel like you're in a different world. And then you've got mixed reality, which is a bit of way between the two, where you are overlaying information on the real world, but you can interact with it. So, for example, you might be able to have some glasses and you see a cup and you can pick the cup up and there's something underneath. It's not really there, but you're seeing it. So these are three terms which I'm going to be using quite a bit in the next few minutes, so however long this is going to be. And just bear in mind that when I say extended reality, it is everything. Augmented reality is that particular overlay. Virtual reality is that diving into a unique world. And mixed reality is that kind of halfway house, but closer to augmented reality. So there's 6 things you need to think about when designing for external XR. You got to think about the comfort and safety, the interaction, the environment and the spatial components, sensory input, the engagement, storytelling, and the inclusion and accessibility throughout everything. If you're doing all of those, then you're doing a good job. So to do that, we have components. Now, these components, you've got headsets, you've got tracking sensors, you've got the raw computing power, and some kind of controllers. Now, I've said this is optional because we are moving away from physical controllers and into our hands and gestures doing the work. When we use all these parts correctly, we can start to think about designing these right. So we can get a comfortable interaction, we can get a good environment, we can get sensory input when we think about our technical components in the right way. So headsets, these are the kind of things which we are very familiar with, the idea of virtual reality headsets. Because I'm going to start about VR first. It's something on there, some screens put apart. And that is based on a very old principle. It's from 1838, the first example of this. And this is just 12 years after the first photograph. Okay? Bear in mind, humanity had never taken a photograph before. And then 1 year, we did. And then 12 years later, we work out that if you take 2 cameras, about the same space as your eyes, and take 2 photos, they're taking a slightly different image, stereoscopic. So when you look at those 2 images, where you show one image to one eye and the other image to the other eye, you create a 3D effect because each eye sees flat images. We don't see depth. Depth needs 2 eyes. So just showing 2 flat images, slightly different to each eye, our brain creates the illusion of depth. And that's a really amazing thing. It's been around for a very, very long time. And that's all virtual reality is. 2 screens creating a stereoscopic image. Because we've got binocular vision. So everything in our brain is a trick. You know, we might think we've got 180 degree vision, but actually it's all an illusion. Yeah, that's really it. If you get your mind around the idea of a normal image shown to each eye and it's stereoscopic, then you understand the fundamentals of how virtual reality works. This is an example of stereoscopic image. the difference is very minor. The way I can see it most clearly is at the top left of the Cartier image. We've got some flowers. On the left image, they're slightly obscured. On the right image, they are, you can see them. They're actually there. And our brain goes, okay, what's this? Let's work it out, and makes it 3D. So it gives you an insight into how much heavy lifting the illusion of our mind is doing with virtual reality. Now, stereoscopic cameras are very cheap. They've been around for a very long time. You can go and buy them for a few £100s now. And I wouldn't be surprised if in the next few years we start seeing smartphones with stereoscopic images, because why wouldn't you want a 3D video or 3D photo of your family? Who knows? And this is a really simple principle, means that we can use our smartphones to play virtual reality images. We don't need these big clunky headsets. We can just use simple smartphones. We are limited by the interaction capabilities on these kind of phones, and we are limited by the processing power, but that might change. So Google Cardboard was something that was around for quite a few years. We've played around with it, but it just didn't really take off in the way you wanted to because of those limitations. But you can get the competition. You can get virtual reality in such small packages. I would be expecting Google Cardboard kind of interactions to make a comeback in the future when these things start getting even better than they are now. But that's all it is. And that's why you can use Google Cardboard. Now, this is going to be going a bit further. So you can create head-mounted displays where you are shooting an image which reflects off mirror into your eyes. Now, this is very similar to Google Glass or Microsoft HoloLens. Very simple principle that you are seeing an image on that screen. Your brain will interpret the slanted glass as a flat picture, and the stereoscopic image takes forward. So we don't need to have the screens in front of our face. We can have mirrors and reflectors. That will let us do really cool things with mixed reality and augmented reality. Particularly with mixed reality, getting a really quality depth field. So rather than just looking through a screen and having overlaid information, as you might have seen with Pokemon Go, we get to see almost figures walking around. This is a really, really old technique too. So it was called Pepper's Ghost, is one of the most common names for it, where you have a piece of glass and you got something off stage, and then when that's illuminated, then the light will travel from that source to the glass, reflect over, and audience can see it. This is used in Disneyland, in the Haunted Mansion ride, so you can see ghosts appear. It's been used on fashion catwalks with people like Kate Moss years ago. So yeah, mixed reality can use, and augmented reality can use stereoscopic vision in the same way virtual reality can. So where could this be going in the next decade or so? Now, there's a lot of research on haptics happening. This is really the limit of where we are at the moment. We can make very convincing visual interactions, virtual augmented, using stereoscopic vision. But feeling something really there is really critical, because reality is kind of illusion. Our brain is just making things up. So you've seen stereoscopic vision, how we've got two flat images which look a bit different, and you can't really see how that could be one. Our brain sees the difference and hallucinates the 3D world. Part of the illusion that we're living in with our world is touch. So I put my finger out and I touch the screen in front of me. I feel screens, I squish them, and that feeling is really important. Now, there's another signal going on there, which is sound. So I'm this tube of cream. You're hearing that crackling. So I'm seeing, I'm hearing, I'm feeling. Sound's the easy one. We have really good headphones and really good in-ear headphones, so we can hallucinate the sound quite effectively now. But touch is quite difficult to do. So there's a lot of research going on to haptics and how vibrations can kind of fool our body into feel like we're touching something or something's happening. And this is really going to be excellent when you're thinking about sport. Now, the force of a racket, or interaction with objects. You feel like you're pushing something on your hand. So there's a lot of work in hand-focused haptics, having gloves with sensors and bits on. You can see these designs of where haptics can go. And it's really interesting work. I mean, there's a paper down there you can look into. But this is something which hasn't yet been developed at the level of fidelity we'd like. It's still a bit clunky. It's still a bit experimental. So what you're seeing there on the screen is one of the best haptics gloves developed, published in a journal paper last year, and it's still not ready for market. So I reckon it's a good 10 years or so before we're going to have really good haptics to really create the full illusion of place. Scent is a really interesting thing. We feel that scent is a big part of the world and a big part of that illusion. So you walk into a garden, you smell garden. You walk into a kitchen, you smell the cooking. You walk into a room at Christmas and you smell the Christmas tree. So scent creates a really powerful sense of being there and plausibility illusion. People have been playing around with scent and cinema since 1939. That was the first development of scent for cinema. It's never quite taken off. I think I'm not sure why, to be honest. I'm assuming that it's because in a cinema, you're very aware that you're not looking at something real, because even with a big screen, it's not so immersive that you're in the movie. So when you get something which is scent-like, you go, yeah, that feels like the real thing, but you're disconnected. So it's that kind of uncanny valley. Maybe with virtual reality, where you feel that you are really in it, the scent will be a more plausible illusion. So there's a lot of things happening with virtual reality and scent, but this is something which is really needs to be taken further. But the technology is there. It's just not really been applied yet. Taste is another really interesting thing. Taste is just a load of chemicals plus scent. And because most taste happens in the nose, in our mouth, and the chemicals evaporate, goes into our olfactory system, and we can sense it, smell, which is why warm drinks will taste more intense than cooler drinks. That's why you should never put whiskey and ice together. So there are devices out there which can simulate taste. This is a fake virtual cocktail maker. So you can, through the scent around and the sensation in your mouth, you can mimic a drink. And this has been used, there's a paper down the bottom there by Kurish E. 2019. So there is work happening on creating that extra plausibility illusion. This is the kind of thing that will be happening in the future. Now, when you combine really great vision, really great sound, really great touch from haptics, smell and taste, that's all of the senses working together. And when you get all the senses working together, you create a very powerful sense of being there. The presence is incredibly high. You start to enter this world because all the cues are telling you this is real. The moment when you just use the visual part, you don't have as much sense of presence because you're very aware that the scent isn't there, the smell isn't there, the taste isn't there, the touch isn't there. So the virtual world always has a bit of difference to it. So if we're going to get to the world where it really feels like you are there, these are the kind of things you need to be thinking about. Tracking sensors are a really important part of how virtual and augmented reality works. So you've got these MEMS, micro electromagnetic systems, and these are devices which can just be fitted onto your circuitry, and it lets you achieve true 6 degrees of freedom. And that's all of the ranges of motion that you can get. So forward, back, up, down, left, right, twist, turn, however you want to describe it. You have different MEMS, different orientations, and they work together to work out where you are in space and how that is changing. The principle, again, is quite a simple one. It's really just an accelerometer. So you've got, it's working where you are relative to gravity. So a single MEM, which is only a few hundred microns across, is able to work out where you are with the forces relative to gravity. put them all together, and you know where you are. So this isn't going to be a deep dive into physics of accelerometers or MEMS. That's a much deeper topic than we need to. Just bear in mind that all it is on your phone, in your headset, whatever it is, it's MEMS working together to create 6 degrees of freedom. We are working out where we are in space and updating the software and visions based on that. That's all it really is. So we can get sophisticated motion detection by combining the readings from 3 accelerometer axes. But we can't get data to represent the fine granulated rotation of the device. So for that, you need gyroscopes. So MEMS are really good and simple, but simple accelerometers, but that kind of really fine level, it doesn't work as well at. So if you want to know roughly where you are, perfect. But to get that high level of presence where you feel you're inside something, where every action you do is smooth and in the system, you need gyroscopes. And this is where you're working out where you are compared to a fixed orientation. So when you make small changes, it can sense that and know exactly where you are. So combining MEMS and gyroscopes together is a very powerful way of knowing where you are in space, where you're trying to get to in space, and then updating the video framework. So yeah, that's some really fundamental parts. You know that MEMS and gyroscopes, you're in a good place. So cameras are a really awesome, powerful part. Now, why do we have cameras on virtual reality? Well, you have cameras on the outside, and they are working where your hands are, working where the room is. So you can start to use your hands as controllers. So when you do think about doing this or any other parts, it becomes very possible. The monochrome cameras are really powerful. Now, computing power is another issue to think about. Now, when we think about computers in the 1960s or so, they were huge devices, as we all know, and it took a whole room to just not do very much. So what we have in our phone is more powerful than went to the moon. We know this. But as I talked about before, Google Cardboard doesn't really work very well because your phone's got limited computing power compared to an actual computer. That's changing. But if you want to have very high resolution images, high tracking sensor and high refresh rate, these things are not quite capable of doing it. So you need to have that high computing power. The ability to process large amounts of information dictates your limit of what presence you can achieve. So controllers are really important. MEMS for hands. So we put lots of MEMS, accelerators and bits on your hands, and we can start to just use a glove to work out where your finger is in space and then control things. You could do that with cameras, but this is probably a more precise method because some things cameras might not be able to see your fingers do. So if the camera's watching me there and I bring my fingers around here, you can't see where they are. So having a different method can be quite useful. I'm not going to show the video for copyright reasons, but just bear in mind there is a lot of research in getting very fine actions with your fingers through cameras, and controllers can do great things as well. So we talked a bit about virtual reality, and I've mentioned augmented reality. So now I'm going to dive a bit more into how augmented reality works. So as I said before, augmented reality is overlaying information, and mixed reality is where you can interact with that overlay element. So it's that kind of bridge between just seeing something laid over and having a world that you dive into. This has been around for a very long time. Sword Damocles back in 1968 was the first version of augmented reality. We start overlaying something in the world. You can't do very much with this, but it's really moved over a great way now. So you have AR headsets and you have smartphones, you have lots of devices. The interaction design for these is limited at the moment. So think about Google Glass, the top right, really a commercial failure all over. And part of the reason is you couldn't do very much with it. The battery life, the computers require so much power, the computational power you can do on the fly, what kind of screens you're using, the weight, the style, it's all a bit too much. They are more clunky devices down the bottom right, where you can do a lot more than Google Glass, but it's still clunky. It's not very user-friendly and limited interaction. You're more likely to see augmented reality in your phone, where you've got more processing power and it's about interacting through a screen. Not as nice as seeing through glasses. So AR uses similar technology or the same technology as virtual reality. So the MEMS in your phone are going to be talking about where things go. Now, what we can do now is some really exciting things coming up. So a few years ago, this paper was published about working out where you're looking based on gaze. And this is a really important step forward in technology, because if we got some AR glasses, then it can know exactly where we're looking and can give us information based on where we're looking. Or maybe we're playing a game and we look at a door and the door opens, or anything else you can imagine. This is quite useful. We don't have to tap it. We don't have to tell the computer we are doing this. The computer would just know. There's multiple ways of doing tracking. And tracking is really important, because if you're trying to put a mixed reality layer so we can interact with it, or an augmented reality layer where something looks a certain way, then you need to track something. So we've got marker-based tracking, which is like you put a QR code somewhere and it says, right, put an animation on that item. You go image-based tracking, which is very similar, where it says, look for this image and do this thing on that image. Facial tracking, you'll probably have seen virtual makeup, so augmented reality makeup. That is where you're tracking the face, the lips, the nose, the eyes, and then applying this morphed image onto your face. So it's not creating brand new makeup every single time. It's kind of taking this generic face, put it onto you, morphing it around, and that's now your image. Now, there are other ways of doing that. AI is producing some more interesting areas, but you still need to track the face. Body tracking is where you're detecting parts of your body and movement, and then using that movement to control a kind of puppet. So I've got one bit here, I've got my arm. So when my arm moves a certain way, the camera can track it and do various things. Obviously, we talk about hand tracking, where your camera's looking at where your hands are there, or maybe you've got object tracking. So this will cover most of the things that you could want to do, and then do something in that overlaid layer based on what you're looking for. So just bear in mind these kind of trackings exist. And the kind of interfaces to do that tend to be forms of gyroscope or forms of camera. The camera might not use visible light, might use infrared light for accuracy, really. The kind of interfaces that work with virtual reality would work with augmented reality too. So there's no reason why you can't have scent or haptics or hand control for augmented or virtual reality, especially when we move towards headsets. So everything you see me talk about with virtual reality really can apply to augmented as well. That's why the technology area really gets a bit murky. It's not so much about VR technology and AR technology, it's more XR technology applied in a certain way. When you start throwing in artificial intelligence, things get really interesting. Now, when you know about the context you're in, and this thing's happening here, so we're going to give this result. So rather than playing one animation every time, it says, right, what are we seeing here? What kind of item is in front of me? If you have a general AI that can recognize what object you're looking at, like this is a cup and this is a phone, then we can start giving different kinds of interaction in this overlaid information based on what we're seeing, maybe based on the environment you're in, maybe based on who you're with or what you're talking about. So when you start thinking about changing augmented reality based on the context, that is really powerful. And this is something which is really new and really coming along. So they've got a paper linked down the bottom there, only published last year. So we're still a bit away from applying a lot of AI to augmented reality, but it really is starting to happen. Cloud computing is making this very possible. So why? What else there could be? So artificial intelligence is that next thing. Artificial intelligence is what makes posture recognition, tone of voice recognition, facial expression recognition, and biometrics really come alive. If you want to sense the human body and sense faces and react to contexts to make that virtual reality, augmented reality more engaging, you need AI. Why is this important to talk about? Because you'll notice most of the technology I mentioned with VR and AR, the principles are rather old, been around for many, many, many years, and it's now just a more portable version of it. AI is where things start getting new and start getting interesting, and this is really looking into the future. So I'm going to take a quick look into the world of AI. So data really is everywhere. So we look at this picture. There's who uploaded the picture, what age they are, how much they weigh, all that kind of information about the person. There's information in the image. Is it healthy? Is it unhealthy? Is it meat-based? Is it Western-based? Is it Asian-based? Everything. So data really can be everywhere. Everything can be described through data in some way. And when you've got data, you can measure it, you can organize it, bring it together and synthesize it, and then apply it in something new. So when we measure data, we've got lots of things around us. We've got websites, we've got activity, we've got smart devices everywhere. They're all collecting information. On social media, we're posting things, that's giving information. Remember, social media, we are the product. So even though we might be just wearing sort of AR glasses or a VR headset, everything we're looking at, interacting with, has context, has data, and that data can be sensed in some way. For example, this is a map, and you can see every point of the map has lots of data around it about land use and everything. So we have context-aware data of where we are when we're using these devices that could be used by an AI to give a unique experience. We have various assumptions about data which need to be thought about. We think that data is neutral. Data is very rarely neutral. So, for example, we could ask a question of, was Boris Johnson a good Prime Minister? No. That's quite a divisive question. It might depend where you are. Looking at those maps, if we walk into a blue area and ask people, and we're only asking people in blue areas on that map, we're probably going to get a different answer than if we only ask people in the red areas of the map. So that is quite important. Where we sample data from will bias the answer to the question. To get representative data, we need to go to wide ranges. But if you think about that's the whole UK, if we just go into a random place in England, just throw a map there, we're going to get a lot of red and a lot of orange, which is very Liberal Democrat and Labour. If we go into Scotland, we're going to get a lot of Conservative and Scottish National Party. So we've got a very hard job at getting enough data to be representative of a population. Yeah, not a fan of that guy. So after we got our data and we try and get some neutral, we've got to organise it. So data is often in millions of rows. Even a small household oil company is likely to use 500,000 rows of data on an average analysis. If you're Amazon, you've got millions of rows of data. Everything about purchases, you've got people's names, credit cards, past purchases behaviour, browsing history, data you've got from other sites. All this has to be organised, which is very challenging. Many data analysts spend more time organising data than anything else. So just because you've got records that are linked doesn't mean that you can use it. You've got to put the time in there. You'll hear quite often that the term big data just means millions of bits of data. So if you've used Excel, scale that a few million times and you're there. So we've got to think about algorithms. Now, algorithms are what define computer science and define artificial intelligence. It's a step-by-step process of how to do something. So, for example, this is an algorithm for creating a cake. So first you mix your ingredients, spread them in the pan, bake 350 degrees Fahrenheit, test with a fork if it's ready. If it's not ready, bake some more, test with a fork. If it's not ready, bake some more, test with a fork. Now it's ready, remove from the oven, let it cool, and then eat it. That is an algorithm for making a cake. Now, logically, that makes complete sense. If you know coding, you can write this in a way which says do this, do that. But we all use algorithm logic all the time when doing normal stuff. So the concept of an algorithm, it might feel a bit scary at first, but it's just logic that we use as humans. So, you put something in, you sort it out in some way. You can sort it or merge it or do something, and out comes the data. So lots of AI traditionally has been you put an event, it triggers an algorithm, it predicts what you want, and an output comes out. So you might have something based on regression where you're just predicting the score you're going to get. So it could be the probability that an event's going to occur. If the event's likely to occur, you do this. If it's not likely to occur, do that. You might be looking at for example, lots of health data, or if you drink, if you smoke, how much coffee you drink each day, how much exercise you do, all those things. That goes into an algorithm, and the regression algorithm predicts if you're going to have a problem with sleep or not. If it predicts you're going to have a problem with sleep, that thing happens at night, and if it doesn't predict you're going to have a problem with sleep based on those things, then it doesn't happen at night. So every day it's just sensing all things around you, making a judgment at night, and then doing something. That's a bit dumb, but it's what's been happening for a long time. So coding, back in the day, used to be done by hand. That's Margaret Hamilton and her manual coding. She wrote all the coding by hand, and that got us to the moon. So simple algorithms do work more effectively. Now, once you've got an algorithm and you've sorted it, doing things, you're making sense data. You're synthesizing things. You see this all the time. Here's a whole load of examples. But my favourite one is things like dating apps. So you join a dating service, and we'll assume the business model is getting you a date, getting you happily in a relationship, and not keeping you on the site to keep you money. It goes, well, we've got data on who's used our site in the past. And when you leave the site, you might be able to say, yes, I found somebody. Great. So we run an algorithm and say, well, what makes these people together? What is it about people's things they like, they've said, the religious views, social views, hobbies, interests? What kind of mix happens to go together well to create a yes dating? That's regression, just taking lots of data and crunching it and saying, well, are they likely to happen, yes or no? So all these things happen to make sense data. Now, lots of algorithms go very deeper into making predictions. So when you're running an algorithm using regression, you can make a prediction. So is this person likely to commit a crime? That's a really important thing. So it works out that if you use an algorithm to predict if someone's at risk of committing a crime after they've been arrested, they're better at making judgments than a human. That's really important. A human, makes worse choices than a machine. So we can start putting this thing and running our lives on it. Do you get bail? How much is your bail? What can things do? Now, when you see things like this Boston Dynamics dog, which can walk and do things around, all it's doing is lots of predictions of, am I likely to fall over? And then moving its legs in different ways. Also, machine learning is really interesting because algorithms are evolving. Back in the day, it used to be you hard program the algorithm in. That's good old-fashioned coding. You say, if this, then that. And that hard program might be done with some help from software to create an algorithm through regression, but you knew what was happening. You could describe it. What we're moving into now is machine learning, where you get some data, You set parameters of this is what success looks like, and then the computer works out the algorithm to determine success. Now, it's constantly getting new data and it's constantly improving that algorithm, where it might produce 10 different algorithms, see which algorithm is the closest to creating that success parameter, and then ditching the rest of them, taking that algorithm, evolving it further, creating 10 more, and then just going from there. So over time, it gets smarter. The problem with this is that we don't know how it is doing what it's doing. So ChatGPT, the way they created ChatGPT 4 is they basically told ChatGPT 3 to get better at doing some stuff, and they can't say why or how. And then that causes a problem when you depend upon algorithms for your legal systems, then you can't describe why a certain thing happens. If you're setting bail, why has that person got bail and that person hasn't? And you can't describe why that's a legal problem. So as powerful as machine learning is, it does create issues. Also, you get issues where the machine learning is doing things that it shouldn't be doing, but getting good results. So skin cancer is a very famous example where they fed lots of images of skin cancer to the computer and lots of images of non-skin cancer skin, and got the computers to work out which image is what. It turns out you put a ruler in the image and straight away, skin cancer. Because it worked out that most of the images with skin cancer the computer was getting had rulers in. So it didn't really look at the skin issue, just looked at the whole picture. And medical images have rulers, so it worked out ruler equals skin cancer. Now that's a really useful thing if you've got that bit of data, but it means that the algorithm's really good doing something that isn't very useful. So be very careful of what kind of data you feed it and what kind of parameters you set as success. I'm going to just skip forward a few things. So the accuracy of what you can do with artificial intelligence is really great. Now, I talked about sleep problems. Now, if you have a very small amount of data, which is actually probability of staying awake when sleeping, the hours of sleep you get per night, and your anxiety levels, we can predict with a really high certainty, 75.4% accuracy, if you get a problem with sleep. That's just one example of a artificial intelligence system. So if we just measured those three things, we can start having intervention. What the intervention is, this is a context-aware intervention. It's based on your day and life. So if we're creating a new platform, we've got our Apple Vision virtual reality, where it wants you to start living in your world and watching films at night. So it could be that your smart home and smart environment is measuring all these probability sleep, hours sleep per night, and the level of anxiety. And then when it predicts that you are likely to have problem sleeping, maybe it gives you a warning at night. So rather than watch a film, it says, well, how about we do some meditation instead of watching a film? So you can have an intervention. So this is kind of getting back to that, how virtual reality can work. Those really awesome kind of interactions where you've got the virtual assistants doing amazing things. Depends on context, depends on processing, and depends on this artificial intelligence. So if you understand artificial intelligence and you understand that it's measuring things around you in the world, creating an algorithm that will then predict the probability of events happening, and then you can say, if that event happens, do this thing in the virtual world. Right. So that's kind of getting quite deep into this underlying idea of how things work. I've mentioned regression a lot, but I haven't explained what regression is. So I'm now going to dive into that part of it, what regression is. I'm using regression because it's something which is quite easily explainable, is quite common, uses low computational power relative to other things. It's not the only thing. There's a lot more in artificial intelligence than regression, and those really awesome ideas you're having about interaction with virtual reality and augmented reality that need artificial intelligence to happen might use more sophisticated models. But if you run with this will be a great foundation of how the AI can work interacting with your virtual reality. So let's start by thinking about this. What makes a good cookie? So there's cookies on the side. Is that good or bad? There's a lot of things you can think about. There's the actual size of the cookie. There is the number of chocolate chips in there. You've got the colour of the cookie. Now, you probably guessed here from my slides, size and number of chocolate chips is the best one, but hey, maybe the surface texture is there as well. We're going to choose just size and number of chocolate chips. If it's the right size and the amount of chocolate in there is good, then we're happy. If it's too small or too big, we're not. If too few chips, too many chips, we're not. So that's an easy thing to get our head around. We can do that. And we can map that on a screen. So we've got cookie by radius and we've got chips by radius. So we see there's a nice Goldilocks zone in the middle where lots and lots of good cookies happen. And we've got the outside where it's just too low or too little of everything. Okay, so how do we define if something's good? Well, we could just set a parameter saying, well, if you've got less than this number of cookies, chips, or more than this number of cookie chips, that's bad. If it's smaller than this, it's bigger than this, it's bad. That's right. Now, the problem with that is that we get rid of all the red. We get rid of most of the red. So the red are the ones that humans have said are bad, and blue humans said are good. So most of the bad are gone, but there's some good cookies we're throwing away. And there's some bad cookies we're included. So that parameter, it is better than nothing, but doesn't really work. So what we could do is take that and go, well, we make those parameters much smaller. So only if you can exist in this box. And that is okay, but think of all those good cookies we're throwing away. So this is a really strict quality control, which is not very good. You could say, well, if you exist in this splodge, then you're good. But trying to draw that on a chart is very difficult. Remember at high school, you must have done some algebra where you drew symbol. That is a very complex curve to describe in an equation. However, you could do that. And you could say, well, if you're in this elliptical zone, then you're good. If you're outside the bad. And straight away, our false positives and false negatives start dropping away and life gets quite good. So that's the equation that you'd use for that. Quite simple. So your regression is pretty much working out this. It's working out a simple equation for inclusion based on parameters. So machine learning is doing those kind of things. So with that approach, you can do amazing things. I talk about sleeping, but you can go to things like 99.3% accuracy of who someone is by the way they walk. Now that's really interesting. So it could be in a virtual reality world, you've got social VR, lots of different people, the way they're acting, we can work out who they are, or maybe we can work out something about them and pull up information there. So someone walks towards you in a virtual world and we can go, oh, it's that person, just by how they're walking. The computational power is quite high, but we can start to do things. So we've got our smart glasses on, walking down the street, who's that person? Oh, that's who it is. That's the kind of thing we could be doing in the future by using augmented reality. Obviously, the last thing you do is apply it and make it really work. So I'm going to skip over some bits I prepared and talk quite briefly about neural networks. Neural networks is incredibly complicated. It's not something which is coming to virtual reality, augmented reality yet, but it's on the horizon going forward. Conceived in the 1950s, only possible now over the last 20 years with the computer power we've got, and it's still a challenge. So you've got thousands of algorithms looking for particular things. So you might just be saying, I'm looking for an edge. So one algorithm is just looking for edges. Another algorithm is looking for color. Another algorithm is looking for shape. So they're all creating different things they're looking for in a picture, for example. And then when you get this kind of picture, there's a fingerprint pattern. So you go, well, what are we looking at here? So we're going to find your face. There's things looking at that image. Saying, well, who is that? What are we seeing? We're seeing slopes of eyebrows, slopes of faces, contours, shadows, hair color, kind of angles of hair, lots and lots of variables. So thousands of neural networks, thousands of algorithms looking for individual pieces, and they go, this is a fingerprint of what this person looks like. Then analysing thousands of other images, looking for the closest match to the fingerprint. And that's where you get the Find My Face of going, this person's closest to that person. And we're training these all the time. Whenever you answer a CAPTCHA and saying, do this, do that, you're giving the computers the positives. You're looking at, this is what things really are. So we've got unsupervised machine learning. This is really interesting, where you just give data to a computer and say, hey, find me some groups. Now, this is music, so it could be, there's lots of things you can look at with music. So there's the beats per minute, there's the frequency range, the rhythm, maybe the kind of instruments played. What we don't know is what genre it is, but you can say, well, we've got clusters around there, so we're going to assume that these things kind of sound similar in some way. And then we're going to go, well, there we are. So unsupervised machine learning can work out that there are groups of things happening there, that we should put these things together. So when you upload a song to Spotify, it could be included in a you may also like, just because it happens to be in a very similar cluster as the song you listened to before. And that's really useful when you think about what you're overlaying in the virtual world. If you want to start overlaying information, you might give something to the interaction in the virtual world that the computer running it has never seen before, but it works out, it's most likely to be something like this, so I'm going to treat it in this way. The problem we get with this is that it's not very smart. So you feed, you're trying to work out if it's a dog or a cat. You feed this thing and it goes, well, it's a bit of a cat, a bit of a dog, a bit of, I don't know, not really too sure. And also you end up where it can't really tell the difference between dogs and cookies because they've got very similar characteristics. So just because it's similar on the things that you're measuring doesn't mean it actually does fit in there. So this is where failures come into the system. So just be aware that you've got to think about what to do with failure when it happens. You also get some terrible things happening where Google Images did some horrific things. They fed very generic images to the process and started saying, well, black people are gorillas. And that's because nobody designed this. Nobody thought about doing this. It's just that the kind of way they gave the images and how they'd filtered and selected the images that they had given led to that result. That's a really easy thing to prevent in hindsight, and it's coming, but it shouldn't really happen. So when you're thinking about what's going to be going into machine learning, you'll be very careful to humanly check the stuff that's going on. And neural networks doing incredible things. They're allowing you to create new masterpieces just by applying the style of Van Gogh to your own photos. This is in Photoshop right now. It's not the future or anything. So what learning does is very good at recognizing patterns and reproducing it. What it's not very good at is creating brand new ideas. This is one of my favourite albums, Trout Mask Replica by Captain Beefheart. Is unlistenable rubbish in many ways, yet it's one of the greatest albums ever made because it is so different. It's so like nothing else that ever happened before in music. AI wouldn't really produce that because if you fed 1940s music into a machine, you would not create the 1960s or 70s. So humans are better at doing things than anything else. Artists are depicting human experiences and reimagining the world in ways that computers just can't. So when we're thinking about what would make a really incredible virtual reality experience, we can think of, we can have an assistant powered by AI that can sense our context and do this and do that and do that. And that's wonderful. But the human condition causes us to think new ideas, causes us to have new ways of working, and really generate something brand new and genuinely exciting. Machines don't do that as well. They're surprising, but not great. So I tend to think that, now this is my definition of what intelligence is. Now, machines will have intelligence when they produce surprising art unlike anything humans have experienced before, which produces complex emotions in the viewer. That's what I'm defining as artificial intelligence, real intelligence tends to be. The surprising thing is quite simple to achieve because we've already seen that. One example I've known is they got an AI to play a zombie survival game, and it scored the highest score ever on its first go. How to do this? Because it worked out that when you have babies, you get points, and when you eat, you get points. So the AI took the player characters into a place where the zombies couldn't get it, and just had babies and ate them. Humans wouldn't do that. Humans wouldn't just sit there for hours and hours and hours in a video game making babies and eating them, because that's barbaric, it's terrible. But an AI would do that. So computers are good at finding ways to that answer in a way that humans never would. And they are often quite surprising. So for example, here's a bracket designed by a human and a bracket designed by a computer. The one on the right by the computer works better than the one on the left. A human would never design the one on the left. So we are already creating art and objects which are surprising, which are thought-provoking and change how we're thinking and are better optimized to the rest of the world. So are we at that point already? Or maybe. Now, it's really good to think about when there's limitations on what we can do. If you want to bring AI or into your virtual worlds, you got to think about what can go wrong. So this is an example of a medical issue. So if we predict an illness and you are ill, you take a treatment and life is good, or hopefully life is good. If you predict an illness but you're not ill, then you're getting worried. Nothing bad happens, but you're very worried. If you predict that you're not ill, really good. But if you predict that you're not ill and you are ill, you might have a really life-threatening situation in your hands. So it's really important to have a human element checking if the prediction you make is important. So if we're talking about your Apple Vision predicting if you're going to have problems sleeping at night and recommending meditation rather than watching a film, if you get it wrong, it doesn't really matter. As we saw before, AI is all about predictions of what's going to happen rather than knowing what's going to happen, and predictions can be wrong. There's always a possibility that the outcome is wrong. So if it's about meditation and films, who cares? If it's about medicine or how we treat people and we're using augmented reality or virtual reality to interact with the information, then we've got to have some way to step in as humans and check to prevent these bad situations happening. And this kind of thing's coming in already. So in Chicago, they've got a list of 1,400 people they feel are likely to commit a crime. And they're giving them home visits, they're putting lists, and they are really following them. They've not done anything wrong yet. They're not criminals, but the police think they might be. And these are people who are, most likely illiterate, or have severe learning disabilities, or maybe, might be homeless people, or various things. So if you happen to have certain characteristics about your literacy or your neurodiversity or your income or your job or where you grew up, all these kind of things, you might end up being targeted by the police and watched and basically harassed when you shouldn't be. 70% of people in 2016 were on this list. As we know, the police in America are taught to shoot first, ask questions later, because if you wait for them to bring their gun up and actually take an action, they might take down a few of your officers before you've had a chance to take down them. So you are more likely to get shot, which is terrible. When you start using these AIs as your outcome, you get a path of dependence that is very hard to come back from. So having a human element in your system to check things that are important is very important for design. always think about how we can intervene and how we can have is this really what you want moment from someone who's not a computer, because computers do make mistakes and those outcomes can be terrible, even when applying to the virtual world. So we're coming to the end of the session, talking about things that are wrong. Here's a really great example. I want to finish on this part. So we're taking quite a deep dive today into the world. We talked about how virtual reality works, how augmented reality works, very basic things about sensors, and we're taking a deep dive into the future of artificial intelligence and how that might interface with these technologies. Just remember this when you think about artificial intelligence being the virtual assistant and driving things forward. This is the correlation between the number of people who drowned by falling into a pool and the number of films Nicolas Cage has appeared in. There's quite good correlation going on there. Now, we all know correlation doesn't equal causation, but when you let machines run with things, they can get some pretty wacky outcomes. So the human element is really important to consider. I hope you found today's session interesting. I hope it's been eye-opening in many ways. We've gone on quite a rabbit hole all the way through, and I hope this has been something which can inspire you to think differently about virtual reality, augmented reality in your design work.